This is the Sunday stream opening song because the other song is copyrighted. La 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 la. Oh look, here comes Dog Cat Fox.
Hi, Sky.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Sunday stream. The stream I do on Sundays because Sunday is the day to stream on Sundays. Hope you're all doing well on this beautiful Sunday morning. Yes, we return once again to a beautiful Sunday morning. A Sunday morning just a couple of days before the grand election of 2024. But we won't be talking about that today because heaven knows on Tuesday I'll be talking about it plenty, as my intention is to do a long stream starting from about 4 p.m. Pacific time until my voice gives out or we know which of the two candidates is now our new president. And depending on reports, that might not actually happen for days afterwards, supposedly, but I got a feeling we'll have a good idea that night either way. Anyway, that's all for another day. Before I get to today's litany of news stories that are not, at least directly, election-related, who's joining me on this beautiful Sunday morning? Let's see, who do we have here? We have Advocatus Diaboli. Good morning to you. The Alexandier. Good morning to you. Lamented Guide. Good morning. Keeverdam. Good morning, and thank you, Keeverdam, for providing the link to the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society donation page. It's pinned there at the top of the chat box, guys. If you take a look at that and donate if you are able, and even if you're not, if you can, share that out on social media. That would be appreciated. So thank you for that ahead of time, and thank you, Keeverdam, for providing the link. Let's see, who else is here? Old Guy Gamer. Good morning. Greetings and salutations, Mr. Scribe. Mr. Scribe is my father until he passes away. But anyway, Scribe Blight, still no real rest, but hopeful tonight's one. Well, dude, rest. Get your rest. You need your sleep. Old people need their sleep. TFA Orcs. Good morning. Somnamnul Nation. Good morning, Mike R. Good morning to you. Meh. Good morning, JB. Good morning, Faustonia. Good morning. Who else is here? Let's see. Full Metal Joker. Good morning. Shadowclaw. Good morning. I'm almost saying good evening. I do so many shows that take place in the evening time or afternoon. I'm always saying good evening. I have to stop myself. Good morning. Good morning to you. The Best Remy. Good morning. See how far I can keep that up, of course. Mr. X51. Good morning. Jill Powers, the River Daughter. Good morning to you. Lamented Guide. Thank you so much. What'd you send me? Ooh, a number 1 Dogcat Fox. Oh, Dogcat Fox.
Wowie, wow, wow.
No, there's a Ranting Monkey Dogcat Fox. Thank you so much, Limited Guide. Appreciate it. Hope you're having a good morning. Draco Rincewind. Good morning. Michael Caruza. Good morning to you, Michael Caruza. That's a name I don't recall having said out loud for quite a while. How are you doing? Hope you're doing well. Kiro Soldier. Good morning to you. Keldrig. Good morning. Asan. Good morning. You're a ridiculous lunatic. Good morning. Anybody else here? Is everybody in? Is everybody in? Then the ceremony is about to begin. All right, well, good morning, everyone, and if I missed anybody, I apologize. Anybody lurking, anybody in the future, good morning. Yes, the test for me over the next day or two is, can I pace the resilience of my voice? Because I'll be talking a lot on Tuesday. Oh, Mike Savage, good morning to you. Bitor 101, good morning. Bitor 101 is the introductory course to Bitor. Jeremiah Hembry, good morning. Anybody else? Okay. Oh, here we go. Michael Cruz, a good sir. I started at art school, but haven't been turning into live streams. I'm flattered. You remember? Of course I remember. I have a really good memory for, like, things I say or names I see. I'm sometimes terrible with associating names to faces. That happens a lot when I'm trying to recall an actor or an actress, and I'm like, what is their name? But, like, names, sounds, things like that, words. Maybe it's my English major pedigree. I don't know. Either way, congratulations for art school. Hope things are going well. John Trioxin, good morning. Ryan R., good morning. All right, so we have a lot to get into today. At least 3 top stories that I put into the thumbnails, so I suppose I have to get to those first. Even though they are, at least one of them is particularly ridiculous and tragic, and you've all probably heard something about it already, but I'm going to go over the story anyway. Orphan squirrel who became social media star was euthanized after being seized from home because, as we know, cute woodland creatures need to be killed for no particular reason. An orphan squirrel that became a social media star called Peanut was euthanized after state authorities seized the beloved pet during a raid on his caretaker's home, authorities said Friday. After anonymous complaints. What complaints? Complaints of what, exactly? I'm sure it's been reported elsewhere, but I don't know and I want to know. Oh, look who's in the chat. So it's a celebrity. 32 flavors of Nick Weiser. Good morning through 32 Nachios and walnuts. Good morning, Nick. I'll just say Nick. That's easier. Good morning to you. Oh, and Josh Hammond. Sorry. Good morning, Josh Hammond. Okay. Anyway, complaints. After anonymous complaints, officers from the State Department of Environmental Conservation. Yeah, nothing says conserving the environment like killing harmless squirrels. Now, the Department of Environmental Conservation took the squirrel and a raccoon named Fred from Mark Longo's home near the Pennsylvania border in rural Pine City on Wednesday, Longo said. So a rural town, guy's got a squirrel and a raccoon for a pet, but we can't allow that, apparently. On Friday, the DEC and Chemung County Department of Health confirmed both animals' fate. Quote, on October 30th, DEC seized why a raccoon and squirrel sharing a residence with humans, creating the potential for human exposure to rabies. Oh, well, you know, anybody owning a cat has the potential for human exposure to ringworm. Should you just, euthanize all cats just to be sure? Why not test the animals first before you kill them? Or is there, and I don't know, but is there not an inoculation you can give an animal for rabies at this point, or is there not? But just on the chance. I mean, a dog could potentially have rabies. Are we going to euthanize all dogs just to make sure? In addition, a person involved with the investigation was bitten by the squirrel. Well, yeah, because the squirrel was trying to fight for its safety and a stranger was taking it away from its family. To test for rabies, both animals were euthanized. I got a thought. Why don't you not kill the animals, and since someone was bitten, give them the inoculation and wait and see if they show any signs of rabies infection, and then you'll know. But even then, JB, thank you so much. I was bored, so I did a funny. Uh-oh. Boredom plus I decided to do something isn't always a good preamble. Let's find out here. I used AI to redo the whipping scene in Roots. Oh, this is going well so far, but with a European slave and Barbary pirates. I'm just not sure people will get the reference. Your name is Khalid. JB riding the edge of Edgelord. Thank you, JB. Appreciate it. Yeah, well, I don't know what to recommend with that piece of art that you've created. Putting it out there may or may not do you harm. Reputationally, anyway. But who knows? Twitter is a fun place. Geez, let's see. To test for the agency said in a statement CBS News and New York reported, the animals are being tested for rabies, and anyone who has been in contact with these animals is strongly encouraged to consult their physician. Yeah, and what happens when they both test negative? Oh, AB, okay. Neither agency responded to the Associated Press request for comment. Peanut amassed tens of thousands of followers on Instagram, TikTok, and other platforms during the 7 years. 7 years! Since Longo, who runs an animal sanctuary, said he took him in after seeing his mother get hit by a car in New York City. So, I don't know what the incubation period of a rabies infection is. I'm assuming it's something shorter than 7 years. I'm assuming. I could be wrong. But why did the state have to old yeller a raccoon and a squirrel on the allegation of an anonymous complaint that they might have rabies? Peanut's Instagram account shows the squirrel leaping onto Longo's shoulder, jumping through a hoop, holding and eating waffles, and wearing miniature hats. The kind of behavior that a rabies-infected squirrel often behaves, or performs. My words are still catching up with me this morning. Quote, "It is with profound sorrow that we share the heartbreaking news. On October 30th, the DEC made the devastating decision to euthanize our beloved Peanut the squirrel and Fred the raccoon. Despite our passionate outcry for compassion, the agency chose to ignore our pleas, leaving us in deep shock and grief," an Instagram post said Friday, accompanied by a video montage of the animals interacting with their smiling caretakers. Longo and his wife, Daniela, opened Peanut's Freedom Farm Animal Sanctuary in April 2023. It now houses about 300 animals, including horses, goats, and alpacas, Longo said. Well, we have to kill all them too. I mean, I'm sure Peanut was sociable amongst the other animals. I mean, all the animals on that farm need to be slaughtered now, because there's the potential they might have been exposed to rabies somehow at some point, right? I mean, if the logic's going to be followed through, just slaughter every animal. Heck, slaughter the people on the farm. They might be carrying rabies now. We won't know till after we kill them, but, might as well, just to be safe. Because anonymous complaint said so. He said he was in the process of filing paperwork to get Peanut certified as an educational animal when he was seized. Okay, well, yeah, not the best story to go into the week, and everybody and their brother is up in arms about this, and rightfully so. Obviously, this is not earth-shattering events or anything, but it's just utterly pointless overreach from the state to just eliminate a lovable little animal for no good reason, just on an anonymous complaint. I would love to know the content of the complaint. I don't need to know who filed it. I know somewhere out there people have already identified somebody supposedly responsible for filing. I don't care about the person. I care about the point. What was the argument? What was the complaint about? What was so just convincing to the DEC of this anonymous complaint that they had to go in there, seize 2 particular animals out of an entire sanctuary farm, and murder them because they might have rabies? I don't get it. I don't get it. It's just this side of evil. But Mike Savage, they did slaughter all the animals thing a while back at another animal shelter somewhere in the Midwest, I think. Okay. Did they prove there to be rabies there? I mean, if you actually have a rabies outbreak, okay. You can't really turn back the clock on that one. That is a health hazard both to humans and animals and so on. Okay. If you have evidence of it, but just on the chance that maybe because of an anonymous complaint, is there no way to test animals to see if they have it before you kill them? Admittedly, I am not an expert. I'm not a veterinarian. But anyway, or is it one of those things where you don't know they have it till they show signs and by then it's too late kind of thing? Anyway, not the happiest story. A lot of people have already started memes for this. This is already turning into Harambe Part 2 and 3 because of both Peanut and Fred. But, yeah. Anyway. That's a major story going around right now. In relation to different things, it probably shouldn't or doesn't need to be, but, it is. Let's move on to our true crime story. Actually, I have two true crime stories, but I got one that I had in the thumbnail. And since Terrifier 3 just came out recently, and there's an It prequel series coming out, let's talk about killer clowns. You like killer clowns? Well, if you do, maybe something's wrong with you. Florida's convicted killer clown released from prison for the murder of her husband's then wife. Her husband's then wife. Okay. A woman who pleaded guilty to dressing as a clown and in 1990 murdering the wife of a man she later married was released from prison Saturday, ending a case that has been strange even by Florida standards. Sheila Keene Warren, 61, was released 18 months after she pleaded guilty to second-degree murder for the shooting of Marlene Warren. Florida Department of Corrections records show. The plea deal came shortly before her trial would have started. 18 months for murdering a lady. murdering her romantic rival, let's say. Okay. Keen Warren, who has maintained her innocence even after her plea, was sentenced to 12 years in prison. But she had been in custody for 7 years since her arrest in 2017, and Florida's law in 1990 allowed significant credit for good behavior. It had been expected she would be released in about 2 years. Okay, so she served 7 years. Okay. Quote, Sheila Keen Warren will always be an admitted convicted murderer and will wear that stain for every day of the rest of her life. Yeah, and an innocent lady is dead for 7 years worth of punishment because of 1990 laws. Okay. Let's see. Palm Beach County State Attorney Dave Ehrenberg said in a statement Saturday, Greg Rosenfeld, Keen Warren's attorney, said she only took the plea deal because she would be released in less than 2 years and had been facing a life sentence if convicted at trial, even though she admitted to her guilt. Okay, quote, I never really get this. And I can understand the psychological pressure sometimes that happens to people. There's been plenty of stories where people have taken pleas for crimes they didn't commit because of all the weight and the threat against them and everything. If you didn't do it, don't say you did. That's all I got to say. If you didn't do it, don't say you did. The burden is on the state. If they have the evidence, then they got the evidence. If they don't, and you have the evidence to contrary, then don't say you did. Because if you admit that you did something you didn't do, it'll never leave you. Quote, we are absolutely thrilled that Miss Keen Warren has been released from prison and is returning to her family. As we've stated from the beginning, she did not commit this crime, he said Saturday in a text message. She pled guilty. I don't know what to tell you. Marlene Warren's son, Joseph Aarons, and his friends were at home when they said a person dressed as a clown rang the doorbell. He said that when his mom answered, the clown handed her some balloons. After she responded, how nice, the clown pulled a gun and shot her in the face before fleeing. Palm Beach County Sheriff's investigators had long suspected Keen Warren in the slaying, but she wasn't arrested until 27 years later when they said improved DNA testing tied her to the evidence found in the getaway car. Rosenfeld has called that evidence weak. Well, apparently not weak enough that she pled not guilty and went to trial. At the time of the shooting, Keen Warren was an employee of Marlene Warren's husband, Michael, at his used car lot. Since 2002, she has been his wife. They eventually moved to Abingdon, Virginia, where they ran a restaurant just across the Tennessee border. Witnesses told investigators in 1990 that the then Sheila Keen and Michael Warren were having an affair, though both denied it. Over the years, detectives said costume shop employees identified Sheila Warren as the woman who had bought a clown suit a few days before the killing. And one of the two balloons, a silver one that read, "You're the greatest," was sold at only one store, a Publix supermarket near Keen Warren's home. Employees told detectives a woman who looked like Keen Warren had bought the balloons an hour before the shooting. It's pretty compelling circumstantial evidence. The DNA stuff also. The presumed getaway car was found abandoned with orange hair-like fibers inside. The white Chrysler convertible had been reported stolen from Michael Warren's car lot a month before the shooting. Boy, it's all coming back to me. That's what she's singing. Keen Warren and her then-husband repossessed cars for him. Relatives told the Palm Beach Post in 2000 that Marlene Warren, who was 40 when she died, suspected her husband was having an affair and wanted to leave him. But the car lot and other properties were in her name, and she feared what might happen if she did. She allegedly told her mother, quote, "If anything happens to me, Mike done it," unquote. He has never been charged and has denied involvement. But Rosenfeld said last year that the state's case was falling apart. One DNA sample somehow showed both male and female genes, he said, and the other could have come from 1 out of every 20 women. Well, says the defense lawyer, but we didn't go to court, did we? And even if that hair did come from Keen Warren, it could have been deposited before the car was reported stolen. He said Marlene Warren's son and other witnesses also told detectives that the car deputies found wasn't the killer's, though investigators insisted it was. I mean, we're hearing from the defense attorney, so yeah. Ehrenberg last year conceded that there were holes in the case, saying they were caused by the 3 decades it took to get to trial, including the death of key witnesses. That'll do it. Michael Warren was convicted in 1994 of grand theft, racketeering, and odometer tampering. He served almost 4 years in prison, a punishment his then attorney said was disproportionately long because of suspicions he was involved in his wife's death, says the defense attorneys. He did not respond to a phone message left for him Saturday. Okay, so I swears I didn't do it, but I'll say I did it just so I can get out of prison. The state's case is weak, but I'll say I did it. Everything involved in the crime somehow relates back to me, at least in proximity or ownership, but I didn't do it. I had nothing to do with it. Just random clown assassination. You know. But there you go. JB, I mean, why dress up like a clown? Is that supposed to be a disguise? Yes, I assume so. I assume so. It's to get people's guard down, also disguise yourself, have an excuse to be wearing makeup, look like you belong, conceal your identity. I assume so. Klosky's clowns, like in To Be or Not To Be? I feel like I'm having my Shakespeare knowledge challenged, and I failed. Unless that was something else. Send in the clowns, those happy laughing clowns. I'm not even sure I'm singing it correctly. Send them hopeful, doleful folks by the boatful clowns.
Send in the clowns.
Like Krusty the Clown starts singing. Let's see. Where's Batman in all this? There was a killer clown. I know. If only there was a counterbalance to every killer clown out there. But speaking of clowns and crime and potential corruption and trials oncoming or otherwise, let's talk about Eric Adams. Yes, Mayor Eric Adams. Trial has been set. Boy, oh boy, justice moves swiftly. Eric Adams to stand trial on corruption charges in April, judge says. Accused of conspiring to funnel illegal contributions from Turkey into his campaign coffers, Mr. Adams has pleaded not guilty. Mayor Eric Adams of New York City is scheduled to stand trial on corruption charges on April 21st. Oh, man. Just one day too late to make it an even better joke. A federal judge said at a hearing on Friday. During the same appearance in federal district court on Manhattan, the judge, Dale E. Ho... Daley Ho? Okay. Dale E. Ho responded to a request by Mr. Adams to throw out a bribery charge against him by saying he would rule on the matter at a later date. Okay. Prosecutors also reiterated plans, first previewed at a hearing last month, to bring more charges against Mr. Adams and others in what they described as a wide-ranging corruption scheme involving the mayor, his campaign fundraising, and Turkish government officials who sought to influence him. They added that any additional charges would not interfere with the trial date set by the judge. Judge Ho's decision on Friday essentially split the difference between the timeline sought by the prosecutors and the one requested by Mr. Adams' lawyers, who argued that the mayor needed to go to trial as soon as possible ahead of next year's Democratic mayoral primary. That race was already shaping up to be hotly contested, with several serious challengers pointing to Mr. Adams' legal problems as grounds for throwing him out of office. One of Mr. Adams' lawyers, Alex Spiro, urged the judge on Friday to keep in mind that his client was no ordinary defendant. Well, actually, he is an ordinary defendant, or should be treated as such. Quote, "In this city, with an election happening, the court should take into account that he is not just sitting here presumed innocent anymore," Mr. Spiro said. Quote, "It doesn't give him a realistic chance. If he still has this hanging over his head, that impacts the election, period," unquote. That is not relevant. That is not relevant. What exactly are you asking for then? Mr. Adams, who pleaded not guilty and has strenuously denied any wrongdoing, has resisted calls to resign, including from prominent fellow Democrats who expressed concern after Mr. Adams became the first sitting mayor in modern New York City history to face criminal charges. The 5-count indictment against him was unsealed in late September by prosecutors with the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Southern District of New York. Despite Mr. Adams' vows to fight the accusations, he has already burned through nearly all of the roughly $1.8 million he had raised to pay for his legal expenses, spurring questions about how he will cover costs going forward, especially if the government adds more charges against him. In their indictment of Mr. Adams in September, prosecutors said that he had spent years seeking and accepting free or heavily discounted luxury travel from Turkish officials before receiving a request, through an aide, to help with a problem the Turkish government was having with a city agency. At the time, in summer 2021, Mr. Adams was Brooklyn Borough President, but he had recently won the Democratic mayoral primary and was all but certain to become the city's new mayor. After a Turkish official asked Mr. Adams' aide to remind the mayor of, quote, the support Turkey had offered, unquote, and that it was now, quote, his turn, unquote, Mr. Adams responded, quote, I know, unquote, the prosecutor said. Mr. Adams then pressured the fire department to sign off on the opening of the Turkish government's new high-rise consulate building in Manhattan, despite safety concerns, the prosecutors said. Aside from the corruption inquiry into Mr. Adams, at least 4 other criminal investigations have swirled around members of his inner circle, prompting a series of resignations by some of the mayor's most trusted aides and plunging City Hall into crisis. The storm of legal problems has also raised doubts in the minds of New York voters. A majority of them believe Mr. Adams broke the law and should resign, according to a survey from the New York Times and Siena College, raising questions about the viability of his political career. Boy, this goes on for a while, doesn't it? On Friday, Mr. Adams sat at a table between his lawyers throughout the 2-hour court hearing, during which federal prosecutors and lawyers for Mr. Adams spent much of the time presenting arguments around the bribery charge. Okay, I'm going to skip down a little bit because, A, I think I've read most of this before in previous stories, and B, I need to start training my voice for long-distance running. Man, oh man, Tuesday is going to be something. But I've come up with a couple of ways to try to give myself a little break on Tuesday. Let's see. Even if the bribery charge is ultimately dismissed, Mr. Adams will still face charges of fraud, conspiracy to commit fraud, and receive illegal foreign campaign contributions, and 2 counts of soliciting illegal foreign campaign contributions. Prosecutors also revealed on Friday that they still have not gained access to Mr. Adams' phone and some devices belonging to others in his orbit, but they had amassed 1.6 terabytes of evidence, including 400,000 pages of records from City Hall. And low be to the legal intern or interns at the prosecutor's office that have to page through that stuff. Mr. Adams has told federal authorities that he changed the passcode to his phone before it was seized in November 2023. But could not recall the correct number combination to unlock it. The prosecutor said, oh, well, how convenient. Separately, in a decision issued late Thursday, Judge Ho rejected Mr. Adams' request for a hearing after his lawyers accused the government of leaking information about the investigation to news organizations, including the New York Times. The lawyers also urged that prosecutors be sanctioned. The judge ruled that Mr. Adams had failed to show evidence supporting those claims or make a persuasive case that the government had improperly provided information to reporters. Judge Ho also said that the lawyers in the U.S. Attorney's Office were not the only ones with access to information about subpoenas that had been issued. Still, Judge Ho issued a warning to both sides. Quote, the parties are cautioned that this case is to be tried in the courtroom, he wrote, and not in the press. Unquote. Well, there's always wishful thinking, Your Honor. That's not how the world works. That's really not how the world has worked for years and years and years. But I guess, one can hope. Let's see. What's going on here? These people had been oppressed by Turks so much that he has transgenerational Stockholm syndrome. Yeah, I haven't listened to V Monroe or whatever in so long. I used to listen to him a lot back in the Gamergate days and a couple of years thereafter. He was friends with Sargon and everything. I assume they're still friends. I don't know, but I haven't listened to him a long time. Josh Hammond, Judge Ho. I didn't know Kamala was a judge. Well, she's always looking for that next step up the ladder, as it were. Let's see. Darren Root. There are programs to snake out passwords. Yeah, but the encryption on some of these smartphones is practically impregnable. And there's been plenty of court cases in the past about getting Apple to unlock people's devices or other cell phone companies and things. So, I don't know. I forgot the code, guys. I just happened to forget the code. Or what more likely than not that he did is like he knew that at some point his phone was going to be seized. So he just like changed password and he just closed his eyes and wiggled his fingers over the keypad and then like hit confirm. So even he doesn't know what the code is. He might not actually know what the code is. He might have made sure that he has no idea. Frank Hubbard, what is next for Kamala if she loses? If she loses, I'm going to guess professorship at Howard University, honorary or otherwise, and speaking circuit for the rest of her days. Probably run some nonprofit or something. I don't know. That's my guess. But I'm going to guess that she'll have some kind of safe landing at Howard University. They've played that up as part of her backstory so much that, yeah, some kind of... She'll have a position there, or either on the board of directors or perhaps, like I say, a professorship. And speaking tours until the end of time. That's my guess. Let's see. Now, I got a couple stories left here. Which one do I want to do? Oh, that's too political. Let's not do that one. That's more political. Let's duck some more. You know what? Actually, I just have true crime left. All I've got is some true crime. You want some true crime? Speaking of Howard, or at least in periphery, let's say. Circle of Greed. How a $1 million teacher scheme left hundreds of uncertified teachers in Texas classrooms. Speaking of education, Robert Boo Lee Williams was still seething days after a popular basketball coach and 2 assistant principals at Houston's first 2 historically black high schools were arrested in an alleged teacher certification scheme. Quote, "It almost got me in tears, man," unquote, said Williams, a 1967 graduate of Jack Yates Senior High School in the city's predominantly black Greater 3rd Ward neighborhood, told CNN Friday evening. Okay. Quote, "We are fighting hard to overcome, to show that we are more than qualified. I'm just being straight up with you," unquote. Do tell. And, prosecutors said, more than 200 people certified to teach paid to have someone else take the state certification exam and now are scattered in classrooms across Texas. You don't say! So, 200 people cheated. Quote, "The most important thing to me is the ringleaders have been identified and are being rooted out of our home school district. And the fact that they held positions of power there, where they were held in esteem by the children, is the very worst part of this crime," unquote, Harris County District Attorney Kim Ogg told reporters Monday. Dale Ho Kim Ogg. These are some really unique names. Quote, "They didn't deserve those kids' respect, and I think it leaves children feeling betrayed, not knowing who to trust." I mean, that's part of the equation, sure. The Houston Independent School District employees arrested were Vincent Grayson, a longtime teacher and head basketball coach at Booker T. Washington High School, described by prosecutors as the scheme's ringleader, along with Nicholas Newton, the school's assistant principal and the alleged test taker who helped educators fraudulently pass hundreds of tests. Okay, well, yes, the people at the core and ringleading this scheme they're pretty bad. But let's talk about now, here's my only question. Did the individuals who paid them know that they were having someone take a test for them? Or were they putting up kind of like a wall of silence between this in order to take people's money without risking them having to go actually take the test? I guess that's my question. LaShonda Roberts, assistant principal at Yates, who was arrested for what Ogg said was her role as a, quote, recruiter and referral agent who brought in many individuals who sought the services of the impersonator test taker. Okay, 2 other people not employed by the district have also been charged. Okay, so that means there's at least 200 people out there who knowingly cheated and are now employed by the state. Okay, quote, "The extent of the scheme will never be fully known." Okay, but we know that at least 400 tests were taken and at least 200 teachers falsely certified. 400 tests taken, 200 teachers falsely certified. What happened to the other 200? Prosecutors said all 5 defendants faced 2 counts of engaging in organized criminal activity. 1 felony count based on money laundering because the scheme allegedly yielded over $300,000, and engaging in organized criminal activity based on tampering with a government document stemming from the false statements made when the tests were administered. They have yet to enter pleas. 2 other defendants not employed by the school district were identified as Darian Nicole Wilhite and Twana Guilford Mason, who prosecutors said were proctors during the certification exam. Oh, so he had it rigged from both sides. All right. CNN has sought comment from the attorney for Wilhite. Guilford Mason is in another state and has not been arrested, according to a spokesperson for the Harris County District Attorney. HISD, with nearly 200,000 mostly black and Hispanic students, is the largest in Texas and the 8th largest in the country. Booker and Yates, respectively, were established as the city's first 2 high schools for black students prior to desegregation. Yeah. Boy. And then a whole bunch of teachers, or wannabe teachers, a bunch of liars, decided to try to end run around the process in order to get a position they didn't actually earn. Okay. How the cheating scandal worked. Okay. Grayson, described by Ogg, I feel like I'm reading a fantasy novel or something. Grayson, described by Ogg as the scheme's kingpin and organizer, worked nearly 20 years at Booker T. Washington, which the HISD website said was originally known as Colored High when it opened in 1893. It was later renamed to the famous black educator who helped found the Tuskegee Institute. Grayson's attorney, Cheryl Irvin, acknowledged the seriousness of the charges, but said she awaits to see the evidence against her client. Grayson has been released on bond. Quote, "We all know that a community struggles when the education system struggles." You are not. Please don't tell me you're going to put the blame on society or something, right? I don't know. I'm getting hints here. She told CNN affiliate KHOU after a court appearance on Friday. CNN reached out to Irwin for comment. Quote, "The state has the burden to prove their case beyond a reasonable doubt." Yes. "Mr. Grayson is presumed innocent at this period of time." Yes. "So we will wait and receive what evidence they have against him to allow us to evaluate what we should do next," she said. Okay, well. Boilerplate attorney stuff. Grayson was usually paid $2,500 by teaching certification candidates to have their exams taken by an impersonator at testing centers, where he paid proctors about 20% of that sum to facilitate the cheating. $2,500. Okay, Grayson allegedly made more than $1 million from the scheme. Quote, "It's almost certainly more than that because there's cash as well here, which is harder to trace," Mike Levine, felony chief prosecutor in the county's public corruption division, told reporters. Certification candidates would arrive at the testing center, sign in, and leave, and, quote, "A few minutes later, Nicholas Newton, the proxy tester, would sit in their seat, take and pass the test," Levine said. At times, Levine said, Newton allegedly took more than 1 test at a time. Quote, "In fact, when he was caught red-handed in February of 2024, he was logged into 1 test," Levine said. Quote, "He said to investigators, 'Well, look at the screen behind you.' And he was logged in as a different person taking another test on another terminal that same day." And let me guess, because he's logged in, there's not going to be like a paper trail of matching handwriting or something like that. Great. Newton's attorney, Feroz Merchant, declined to comment on Friday, saying he has yet to see any evidence against his client. Newton was being held on bond. Robert's lawyer, Brandon Leonard, called the charges baseless and said his client has, quote, "dedicated over a decade of her life to serving students and supporting teachers." Oh boy, how she has. "Often under challenging and high-pressure conditions. She has been released on bond." Quote, "In this county, every person is presumed innocent unless proven guilty, and so far, we've only seen allegations. No proof, no evidence. These accusations are simply unsubstantiated claims, and we will aggressively defend against those baseless charges. Ms. Roberts looks forward to her day in court, and we're confident the truth will come to light," unquote, he told CNN in a statement. Well, I hope so as well. The scheme began to unravel in 2023 when the Texas Education Agency, quote, "became aware of certain irregularities," unquote, at one Houston testing center, according to Levine. Love to know what those are. A former coach in the district who was applying for a job as a police officer in another part of the state had what Ogg called, quote, an attack of conscience and notified the education agency. I don't know what's more disturbing, that there's some 200 teachers who aren't qualified to be doing their jobs employed in Texas right now, or that nothing about the checks and balances of the system caught this until some guy had a crisis of conscience. Well, the most interesting irony to me in this circle of greed is that in spite of the perpetrators being the type of people that we trust our kids with, it was actually a good Samaritan with a conscience that brought this scheme to light, she said. That's, again, not a good sign. Not a good sign. This could have been going on for years and years more, if not one person had decided that this isn't right. A curious pattern became immediately apparent. Not immediately enough to be caught before somebody decided to fess up. Investigators discovered that aspiring educators, including many who had failed the exams in other parts of Texas, were traveling for hours to a Houston center where Levine said they passed, quote, with flying colors, unquote. Okay. And none of this was noticed previously. All right. Quote, often these people had previously failed one or more attempts at the certification exam. They then drove sometimes 4 or more hours to the Houston area, and suddenly they were passing the test, Levine said. The HISD employees charged in the scheme have been placed on administrative leave. Quote, all 3 of these employees have been arrested and will be receiving notifications relieving them of their duties effective immediately, unquote, district spokesperson Alexandria Elizondo said in a statement. Quote, HISD was made aware of the investigation into an alleged cheating conspiracy shortly before arrests were made. Any educator who engages in conduct of this nature abdicates their responsibility to our students and to our staff and represents the complete betrayal of the public trust, Elizondo said. Well, it's very, very dramatic. A scramble to find teachers who cheated. Now, local and state education officials are scrambling to track down the teachers who cheated on their certification exams. Quote, if it is determined that any teachers currently working in HISD participated in this scheme or passed their certification exams fraudulently, we will take swift action to terminate their employment, Elizondo said. Pearson VUE, or Pearson View, I guess, a vendor that develops the teacher licensure exam for the state education agency, said it continues, quote, to coordinate with the TEA on their active investigation. Maintaining valid, reliable assessments and public trust is paramount to us, Pearson spokesperson Allison Bazin said in a statement. Quote, we are committed to reliable assessments. We are committed to integrity in professional certification and licensure testing and actively monitor, investigate, and report suspicious activity or anomalies to our customers. No, you didn't. You're actively, what? You weren't actively monitoring up until some guy had a crisis of conscience. Nothing suspicious was suspicious until somebody said something else. But you're the guys in charge. We are committed to integrity in professional certification and licensure testing and actively monitor, investigate, and report suspicious activity or anomalies to our customers. When issues arise, we take decisive action, cooperating fully with customers and law enforcement as required. I'm going to guess that if and or when your contract comes up to maintain your place as the licensure agent for the state, it's going to be under heavy review. I'm just guessing. The Texas Education Agency in a statement said it will, quote, review any and all information shared by law enforcement and pursue appropriate action against any educator involved in this scheme. We will make a final determination on possible actions. Quote, the fraudulently certified teachers run the gamut, Levine said. Quote, they're not just in the Houston area, they're not just in the Dallas area, they're literally littered throughout the state. Literally littered. Literally. The scheme dates to at least May of 2020, according to prosecutors. At least. Possibly more. Quote, worse yet, the cheating teachers include at least 2 sexual predators who were once falsely certified. Let me try that again. Worse yet, the cheating teachers include at least 2 sexual predators who once falsely certified had access through their employment to underage kids on campus and off. Ogg said, quote, one has been charged with indecency with a child, another with online solicitation. We only know of those 2 cases now, but there could be others, unquote. Ooh, lawsuits aplenty oncoming. Levine said some teachers were hired without passing certification exams but had to pass them within a year or 2. In other instances, he said positions such as teachers' aides required the exams for promotions. Investigators have interviewed dozens of teachers, and about 20 of them have cooperated and given near-identical versions of events, Levine said. Quote, teachers and coaches who help influence children's behavior, we count on them for their moral compass, he said. Quote, to think that this many people without what I would consider a proper moral compass were trying to educate and influence children all across the state is definitely troubling. I hate to tell you this. There has been a decided lack of moral compass even in legitimate teachers across the country for the last several years. I don't know if you've noticed certain trends in education, and a lack of moral compass being in some cases an attribute that people appreciate. But in this instance, not a good look. Houston Federation of Teachers President Jackie Anderson told KHOU, quote, anybody who takes a route other than what's legal or ethical, it's very disappointing. Well, the art of British understatement hasn't died yet. Quote, it's a concern because we have thousands of teachers who put in time for study, who put in the work for the assessments, and they pass, unquote. Yes. Those who cheat and get promoted in jobs otherwise undermine those that don't. William, 76, the Yates High graduate, said he was shocked when he first heard news of the arrests involving staff at the predominantly black schools that have long been a source of identity and pride for the city's poorest and neediest students. Yates, founded in 1926, was named for a formerly enslaved man who became an influential minister in Houston. Over the years, Williams said Yates graduates have included journalist and broadcaster Roland Martin, actress Felicia Rashad, and her sister, the choreographer Debbie Allen, as well as numerous city leaders and professional athletes. Williams also helps administer a Facebook page dedicated to Booker T. Washington High School. Quote, this ain't just a black school in Houston. This is the oldest black school in the state of Texas now. This is history, he said of Booker T. Washington High School. We need people to keep our history going on, unquote. Now, I'm sure your history will keep going on. It just, not a good look overall. Not for the school district, not for the state agency, not for the licensure organization or vendor. Everybody and their brother failed in this until one person had a heart. And then it all came crashing down. Good gravy. Abdicas Diabli, did they just conflate being poor with being black? Nah, no one would ever do that. No one in the mainstream press or politics, no one would ever do that. That'd be kind of racist if you did that. Let's see. What does that have to do with the price of beans in China? Oh, the last statement by the guy. Yeah, what's that got to do with anything? We know our history. Like, well, this is part of your history now. I hate to tell you this. This is part of the school's history, not about your history. It's a reflection of corrupt people. Because, the non-corrupt people, I'm sure, far outnumber the corrupt people. But it is a stain on the entire process. All right, because like I say, this alights on multiple levels of oversight in the Houston school district, which obviously led to problems and who knows how many problems in other schools. Can you imagine, as we've already seen in this article, that someone who is demonstrably disallowed from being around children gets a legitimate teacher's certificate to go work in a school amongst children? So this story is just the beginning of who knows how many lawsuits, especially from other school districts, right? And that vendor, the licensure vendor, oh man, are they in trouble. That they didn't catch this scheme over the course of at least 3.5-4 years or whatever. Oh man, they are sunk. They are sunk. And can you also imagine the families of any children that were harmed in some way as a result of being exposed to people that should not have been there in the first place? Ooh. Not good. Not good. Dexter's Killer Lab. Hey, sounds like the stream topic was intense. Well, we had euthanized squirrel. We have mayor corruption charges. We have a killer clown. And then we have corrupt school officials. How can I top that? With my last story. This is one that I actually tweeted out to several of my true crime friends in YouTube because it relates to our collective interests. Let's take a look at this. And depending on what's in this article, I haven't read it yet. It might be a topic for discussion the next time I have a guest on or a panel discussion for living on borrowed crime. True crime's popularity brings real change for defendants and society. It's not all good. Depends on what we're talking about. And there's our recent favorite friends, Lyle and Eric Menendez, who may be released soon. Nashville, Tennessee. In 1989, Americans were riveted by the shotgun murders of Jose and Kitty Menendez in their Beverly Hills mansion by their own children. Lyle and Eric Menendez were sentenced to life in prison and lost all subsequent appeals. But today, more than 3 decades later, they unexpectedly have a chance of getting out. Yeah, unexpectedly and inexplicably, in my mind. But let's read on. Not because of the workings of the legal system, because of entertainment. Well, that's what we were told. Here's the funny thing, and it's not so much funny as kind of ridiculous. The district attorney for the county of Los Angeles, George Gascon, he had a press conference a couple weeks ago now, where he announced that he was reviewing the case of Lyle and Eric Menendez and for all intents and purposes was on the side of reducing their sentencing down to something where they would be effectively released for time served. Even though half of his office, or some major portion of his office, disagreed with his opinion, he was still moving forward. And initial reports were that the recent Netflix documentary, or series from Ryan Murphy, about the Menendez case, was one of the driving factors in, energizing the review. Except that at the press conference, which was at least a couple of weeks since the series had been released and the documentary as well, Gascon said he hadn't actually seen either. Yeah, he hadn't watched either one of them, but apparently just their existence was enough for public pressure to befall him and his office that he decided to move forward. Even though the case was up for review anyway, but now suddenly he's convinced, for what reason, he didn't say, that they deserve to be released. Because here's the thing you have to understand. If you don't know much about the Menendez case, here's what you have to understand. You would have to believe Lyle and Eric Menendez's claims of prior abuse undertaken by their father on them when they were kids and upwards through their teens, in order to even get close, and I don't think even necessarily getting to, but get close to believing the only legal argument they could have possibly had to mitigate their responsibility in killing their parents, and that is what is called an imperfect self-defense. Okay? What is a perfect self-defense? A perfect self-defense is someone pulls a knife on me and starts running at me, and I pull out a gun and shoot this person. Now, there was obviously a threat, a demonstrable threat, and I defended my life with deadly force. Okay? That is a perfect self-defense. An imperfect self-defense is, I think that someone is going to be coming after me with a knife. I have every fair, good faith reason to believe that my life is under threat or the life of someone else is under threat. And I take action that results in deadly force. And someone dies, but there actually was no threat. It was just a grand misunderstanding, let's say, that could mitigate my actions or my responsibility criminally for those actions if I could show beyond a reasonable doubt that I acted in good faith in making that, taking that action under those circumstances. That's what Lyle and Eric Menendez attempted to do. Under the theory that they thought that their lives were under immediate threat the night that they shotgunned their parents to death. Now, of course, these are the two guys that right after they committed the murders tried to avoid responsibility, tried to blame it on strangers or the mafia or something, then took mommy and daddy's money and went on a spending spree and did everything they could to avoid being caught until they were caught, and then all of a sudden claims of past crazy abuse started coming up. They have no credibility. They had no credibility. But even under California law, a past event of abuse does not justify murder later on when it's not actually happening. But for some reason, George Gascon, without actually having seen the documentaries, without naming specifically any new evidence that's come to light that somehow backs up their claims, wants to reduce their sentencing to a point where they've effectively time served. Okay. Sorry for that interlude, but that's my understanding of things. After 2 recent documentaries and a scripted drama on the pair brought new attention to the 35-year-old case, which Gascon said he hadn't watched, at least as of the time of his press conference, the Los Angeles District Attorney has recommended they be resentenced because of a fictional dramatization of events and a decidedly slanted documentary in their favor. I've watched both. I've watched the series, I've watched the documentary. I've done more work on the case than George Gascon has. The popularity and proliferation of true crime entertainment like Netflix's docudrama, Monsters, the Lyle and Eric Menendez story, is affecting real-life changes for their subjects and in society more broadly. At their best, true crime podcasts, streaming series, and social media content can help expose injustices and right wrongs. They can... Maybe, or they could show a pattern of failure on the part of the system, as with my friends at Misery Machine often show when it comes to child and family services across the country. But because many of these products prioritize entertainment and profit, they can also have serious negative consequences. Do tell. It may help the Menendez brothers, okay? The use of true crime stories to sell a product has a long history in America, from the tabloid penny press papers of the mid-1800s to television movies like 1984's The Burning Bed. These days, it's podcasts, bingeable Netflix series, and even true crime TikToks. Hey, what about YouTube? Give YouTube some love. You want to talk about where the true crime genre has really exploded? Take a look at YouTube. TikToks. The fascination with the genre may be considered morbid by some, but it can be partially explained by the human desire to make sense of the world through stories. Sure. In the case of the Menendez brothers, Lyle, who was then 21, and Eric, then 18, so both legal adults, mind you, have said they feared their parents were about to kill them to prevent the disclosure of the father's long-term sexual molestation of Eric. Yeah, and so having previously bought shotguns and hiding them from their parents, and then just, killing them both while they were sleeping on a couch in the living room, and accordingly, so, and more so, their own mother, who was not an abuser in this story, but still, and then they tried to hide it, blame it on the mafia, and so on. But at their trial, many of the sex abuse allegations were not allowed to be presented to the jury, and prosecutors contended they committed murder simply to get at their parents' money. Which they did. For years, that's the story that many people who watched the saga from a distance accepted and talked about. The new dramas delve into the brothers' childhood, helping the public better understand the context of the crime. According to the this is the thing you have to understand. All the information, save for twice-told tales from separate individuals and hearsay, all the information on there being a pattern of abuse comes from the 2 murderers. The ones that lied to the authorities, tried to get away with the crime, planned it, and tried to set up an alibi, the whole 9 yards. If they honestly believed they were acting in self-defense, they would have been on the doorstep when the cops showed up saying, our parents were about to kill us. They didn't do that. They had it all planned out. Helping the public better understand the context of the crime from the murderer's perspective, and thus see the world as a less frightening place, says Adam Banner, a criminal defense attorney who writes a column on pop culture and the law for the American Bar Association's ABA Journal. Quote, "Not only does that make us feel better intrinsically," Banner said, "I feel great, but it also objectively gives us the ability to think, well, now I can take this case and put it in a different bucket than another situation where I have no explanation and the only thing I can say is, this child just must be evil, unquote. Right, because greed can't be a motivating factor in anything that's done badly to someone else. It must be something where they're a victim inherently, and it's justified. Johnny Hellcat, thank you so much. I blame Hollywood's sympathetic villain trend. Like Cruella de Vil, her own movie, and Wicked, and so on. Yes. Here's the thing, and I don't know if I mentioned this on the previous stream. One of the things the documentary brought up and kept railing on, and other people have in the past, is that the sheer brutality of the murders must have behind it something not normal when it comes to murder. Right? That the murders were so heartless and so vicious that there had to be some trauma that was fueling it. Right? It just didn't seem natural that children would do this to their parents. And something else had to be there. Couldn't just be greed. It had to be something else. And I agree. But here's something that I haven't heard anybody else talk about. And admittedly, I have not read every book, every analysis, seen every documentary on the crimes. I was basically reintroduced to the whole thing, watching the docudrama and then the documentary. But here's the thing that caught my attention. One of the first things the brothers said to police when they started asking them who they thought could have done something like this, they tried to push the idea that the mafia were involved, right? Organized crime. That their father's dealings in the entertainment industry had ties to mafia connections and things, and this might be revenge for some business dealings or something. Here's my thought. What if, because so much else about this crime was pre-planned, including going to the movie theater to try to establish an alibi, pre-buying the shotguns and the other weapons and so on. What if the brutality of the crime was part of the staging in order to blame it on the mafia? Because here's the thing. You've got two spoiled rich kids living in Beverly Hills, the Hollywood elite, surrounded by the entertainment industry. Again, this is just a theory, a true crime theory. What if the notion of what a mafia hit looks like to a couple of dumb kids, grown adults, but still man-children, what if what a mafia hit looks like to them is something out of a movie rather than something practical? Like a savage shotgun slaying, like you'd see in Scarface or something. What if the brutality is not inherently tied to some trauma fueling it, but the alibi fueling it? I haven't heard that said yet. I'm sure someone else has said it. But again, I've been detached from this since the 90s when I watched a little bit of it on TV as a kid. Just a theory. A true crime theory. Thank you, JB. Clark Frederick, look up his story, The Real Deal. Name sounds familiar. But okay, I'll take your word for it, JB. Thank you. Let's see. The rise of the anti-hero is at play. Oh, you were just talking about this. Much true crime of the past takes particularly shocking crimes and explores them in depth, generally with the assumption that those convicted of the crime were actually guilty and deserve to be punished. The success of the podcast Serial, which casts doubt on the murder conviction of Adnan Syed, has given birth to a newer genre that often assumes, and it tends to prove, the opposite. The protagonists are innocent or, as in the case of the Menendez brothers, guilty but sympathetic, and thus not deserving of their harsh sentences. Yeah, that's been the through line of this so far. That they've been embraced by the notion that, yes, men and boys can be abused too, and we have to take sympathy on them. And to a certain extent, they're not wrong. But murder? Unprovoked murder? Quote, there is an old tradition of journalists picking apart criminal cases and showing that people are potentially innocent, says Maurice Chama, a staff writer at the Marshall Project and author of Let the Lord Sort Them, The Rise and Fall of the Death Penalty. Well, it depends on what you're going into the story perspective-wise. Are you going into it with a preconceived notion that the convicted is innocent? Or are you going in objectively? That's part of the issue. Quote, but I think the curve kind of goes up exponentially in the wake of Serial, which was 2014 and obviously changed the entire landscape economically and culturally of podcasts, Chama says. Well, you could go back to the movie The Thin Blue Line by Errol Morris, which showed a whole lot of holes in a case of a man convicted of killing a police officer. This isn't new. Serial might be one of the more, sort of well-known ones of the modern day, but a documentary or something going over a previously adjudicated case and saying, wait a second, isn't a new thing. Yeah, if you haven't seen The Thin Blue Line, it's a really good movie, really interesting. I mean, most Errol Morris movies are interesting. Thin Blue Line's pretty good. Fast, Cheap, and Out of Control's pretty good. Mr. Death is also pretty good. And I liked Fog of War. That was an interesting profile of McNamara. But anyway. Let's see. And then you have Making a Murderer, coming along a few years later and become a kind of behemoth example of that in docuseries. Yeah, Making a Murderer. Or probably the only innocent person in there was the guy's nephew or whatever. Maybe. Hard to say. Roughly during the same time period, the innocence movement gained traction along with Black Lives Matter movement and greater attention on police custody deaths. And in popular culture, both fiction and nonfiction, the trend is to mine a villainous character's backstory. Yes, we need to know the backstory of every bad guy so we don't feel bad for them. There is no good and evil anymore. It's all a gray area. Every person who does terrible things to somebody is sympathetic because at some point somebody hurt them. So it's okay, you know. Quote, all those superheroes, supervillains, the movie Joker. The movie Joker. Okay. You're just inundated with this idea that people's bad behavior is shaped by trauma when they were younger, Chama said. Right? Banner often represents some of the least sympathetic defendants imaginable, including those accused of child sexual abuse. He says the effects of these cultural trends are real. Juries today are more likely to give his clients the benefit of the doubt and are more skeptical of police and prosecutors. I mean, there should be a healthy amount of skepticism of the state's case, right? Just in the presumed innocent. But there's a line, man. But he also worries about the intense focus on current true crime, in current true crime, on cases where things went wrong, which he says are the outliers. While the puzzle aspect of did they get it right might feed our curiosity, he says, we run the risk of sowing distrust in the entire criminal justice system. Well, that's the point. That's the point. That's what all of the restorative justice advocates want. That's what all the Black Lives Matter advocates want. That's why they want to tear down the criminal, what they call it, the criminal legal system. They don't want to call it the criminal justice system because there is no justice in the system, but the criminal legal system. Almost putting criminal as a descriptor of the system itself, of course. Quote, you don't want to take away the positive ramifications that putting that spotlight on a case can bring, but you also don't want to give off the impression that this is how our justice system works. That if we can get enough cameras and microphones on the case, then that's how we're going to save somebody off of death row, or that's how we're going to get a life sentence overturned, unquote. Well, unfortunately, George Gascon has apparently decided to take that route. Rather than reviewing the case because significant new evidence came up that precipitated its review, no, he attributed it to media. He attributed it to public pressure. He said that because of a docudrama series and a documentary and public curiosity about the case, then that caused him to act. In the course of his press conference, and at least as far as I can recall, in the course of his interview with Pauly, my friend over at Latino Slant, he never cited specifically what new evidence came to light that decided that he should overturn the jury's sentence. Because here's the thing. If you're going to overturn a jury sentence, there has to be some new evidence that is so compelling that it would override a previous conviction. Now, that evidence could be so compelling that you just outright let the person go, right? Like incontrovertible proof the person didn't commit the crime. A videotape of the crime, or DNA evidence, or something else. Right? I could see a situation where someone was sentenced to life in prison for murder in committing a crime. Let's say, let me think for a second. Let's say A guy is convicted of being a murderer in relation to an armed robbery where he is the driver, the getaway driver, for the person that, killed a store worker in the process of committing a crime. Okay. Guy goes to prison for life because when you're associated with a crime, even if you didn't pull the trigger, you are as guilty as the person who did. Okay. Let's say years after the fact, videotape evidence shows the guy claimed innocence the whole time. He claimed he had no idea the guy did the robbery. He had nothing to do with it. He was just a friend of his that saw him on the street and asked him for a ride, and he gave him a ride. He had no association with it whatsoever, no knowledge of it. But he had no evidence. But that was his claim. But they didn't believe him, put him in jail. Well, then a videotape shows up that almost completely exonerates the guy because he's just like standing there sitting on the hood of his car reading a newspaper or something. And then his friend, who just committed the crime, walks up and has a minute or two conversation with him, and then they just casually get in the car and drive off. It's compelling evidence the jury didn't see and also goes along with the guy's story word for word. It's corroboration. That might be evidence enough to effectively reduce the guy's sentencing down to nothing or exonerate him completely. Okay, sure, that'd be compelling evidence. In the case of Lyle and Eric Menendez, what compelling evidence would say that you're now going to reduce their sentencing and effectively let them go? How was the crime or the severity of it somehow reduced in the face of new evidence that you're not naming? What new evidence could be so compelling? Oh, the jury didn't hear this evidence the last time, is the claim. Okay, well that would mean to me that you'd have to retry the case. If you think that pertinent evidence was restricted from the jury's exposure during the course of the last case that led to their conviction, well then the only appropriate thing to do would be to retry them and let that evidence in and let a new jury decide. Does that suddenly reduce the charges? But no, they're just going to arbitrarily just say, oh, well, you've served your time because now we feel bad for you for the story you told of your abuse, but not because there's any new evidence that shows you were actually abused. Anyway, I could go on, and I may talk about this in a future live stream. JB, thank you so much again. Frederick Clark was abused by a jail officer, Boy Scout leader Dennis Pegg, as a child, murdered him as an adult. He only received 5 years for passion, provocation, manslaughter because Pegg was still abusing kids. Oh, so sort of the avenging angel defense. I see. Yeah, that's a rough one there. That's a rough one. Okay. I see. Yeah, that would be a tough case to have to. Yeah, I could see a jury feeling a certain level of sympathy for someone like that. Thank you, Faustonia, for the lovely huggy dog cat fox. Oh, dog cat fox.
Wowie wow wow.
Oh, there's a key for damn dog cat fox. Thank you, Faustonia. Appreciate it. Anyway, let's see. Adds Chama, if you open up sentencing decisions and second looks at criminal justice policy to pop culture, in the sense of who gets a podcast made about them, who gets Kim Kardashian talking about them, the risk of extreme arbitrariness is really great. It feels like it's only a matter of time before the wealthy family of some defendant basically funds a podcast that tries to make a viral case for their innocence, unquote. That may have already happened. The audience is a factor too. Whitney Phillips, who teaches a class on true crime and media ethics at the University of Oregon, says the popularity of the genre on social media adds another layer of complications, often encouraging active participation of viewers and listeners. Quote, because these are not trained detectives or people who have had any actual subject areas expertise in forensics or even criminal law, then there's this really common outcome of the wrong people being implicated or floated as suspects, she says. Well, that's been true since Unsolved Mysteries and America's Most Wanted. When you're trying to get more information on a case and you open it up to the public, you're going to have armchair detectives coming in and making assumptions. I mean, you have an entire community online that does this for John and Jane Doe cases, for missing children, for unsolved crimes. You can't turn it off. And it's got nothing to do so much with true crime. There's plenty of cases out there that haven't had any major true crime exposure that have a lot of chatter online through different projects and different Reddit threads and things trying to solve things. trying to find out what information they can, trying to figure it out. So that's always going to be the case. I mean, people are still trying to decipher the Zodiac ciphers, right? Quote, also, the victims' families now are part of the discourse. They might be accused of this, that, or the other, or at the very least, you have your loved one's murder, violent death being entertainment for millions of strangers, unquote. You're never going to be able to turn that off. You're never going to be able to turn that off, especially, and here's the thing, when it comes to unsolved murders, or cases that haven't been brought to justice yet, a lot of families want their loved ones' names in the press. It's a double-edged sword, as they say. This sensibility has been both chronicled and lampooned in the streaming comedy drama series Only Murders in the Building, which follows 3 unlikely collaborators who live in a New York apartment building where a murder has taken place. The trio decide to make a true crime podcast while simultaneously trying to solve the case. Nothing about true crime is fundamentally unethical, Phillips says. Quote, it's that the social media system, the attention economy, is not calibrated for ethics. It's calibrated for views. It's calibrated for engagement, and it's calibrated for sensationalism, unquote. It is an unfortunate truth that if you're going to do true crime as a career or as a revenue stream or even as a passion, if you want your stories to get out there, if you want people to become aware of certain crimes or certain patterns of crime and so on, you're going to have to play the game. And the game involves the algorithm. The game involves views and clicks and so on. It's just the nature of the proverbial beast. I've talked to all my true crime friends about this sort of dichotomy between doing something where you're trying to get information out there, but doing it ethically while also having to contend with YouTube, social media, marketing, and so on. It's unavoidable. And it's also nothing that every other legitimate, quote-unquote, news outlet does every day when it comes to reporting on tragedy, large or small. It's just, that's the nature of the beast. Many influencers are now vying for the murder audience, Phillips says, with social media and more traditional media feeding off of each other. True crime is now creeping into lifestyle content and even makeup tutorials. Somehow I don't think that that's a new thing, like doing a makeup tutorial while at the same time talking about a murder trial or something. Quote, it was sort of inevitable that you would see the collision of these two things and having these influencers literally just put on a face of makeup and then tell you a very kind of, it's very informal, it's very dishy, it's often not particularly well researched, he says. This is not investigative journalism. Well, show me a legitimate outlet that does investigative journalism anymore in the first place. But anyway. So there you go. And this concern has been part and parcel of true crime and media reporting on crime, as they said, since like the 1920s, like when newspapers were first invented and somebody decided to play up a case for the sake of selling newspapers. It's nothing new. You can question the ethical nature and methods by which purveyors of this stuff conduct themselves, certainly. And that's a conversation worth having. And I know that many of the people I've interviewed on my series have struggled with that in one way or another. Some are very pragmatic about it. Some are more hesitant to make it any more outlandish than they need to. But unfortunately, in order to get the word out, sometimes you just have to catch people's attention. I've asked this before of Kamran from True Red Crime about some of the and Misery Machine. Sometimes the explicit nature of describing the crimes in the very titles of their videos seems like it's overmuch at times. But they're trying to get eyes on their material, right? Because it's their job, it's their livelihood, which also goes into that whole sort of ironic nature that I put into the title of the series, Living on Borrowed Crime. But anyway, if you're curious more about conversations on those topics and true crime and ethics therein and so on, I have a whole series on my channel, playlist called Living on Borrowed Crime, where I've interviewed individuals and panels of true crime content creators to discuss such things about what they do and how they do it. And so we've been there before. We'll certainly be there again. take a couple more comments from you guys, and then I will wrap things up. JB, I wish I could remember who told me, but the fun fact, Jody Planche once dressed up as his father, Gary Planche, for Halloween. I like that. I don't... Do I know that name? Gary... Context. I'm missing context. Which one is the one on the right? He looks guilty as fuck with that criminal head shape. That would be Lyle Menendez, the dollar store Lex Luthor of the two. Ann Bainbridge, AP, don't listen to them. They only trust legacy media. Yeah, well, I mean, legacy media over the last week in particular. Without getting too much into it, because it's been gotten to elsewise, and we'll certainly talk about it on Tuesday, I'm sure. The Liz Cheney debacle. I mean, anyway, I could go on. Holy cats, Keldrig, thank you so much. Appreciate it very much. True crime speculation is as old as legal systems. There are accounts of crime speculation going as far back as ancient Rome. People have been speculating about Jack the Ripper since he first showed up, and they still do. Yeah, not only the speculation of mysteries, but also skepticism over state action. Right? And this is not an inherently unhealthy thing. There's a line. It's hard to draw that line clearly because it's all sort of like on a case-by-case basis. But, having a certain... I mean, that's what our whole justice system ideally, not always in outcome, but ideally is supposed to do. That's why there's a presumption of innocence. That's why the state has to present their case, the defense presents their case, and they have to do so, at least in the state's case, beyond a reasonable doubt. That's why we have these checks and balances. That's why we have these insulatory mechanisms in our justice system to try to put the burden on the state to have to prove their case, that everybody is entitled to a fair trial. Now, how do you estimate fair in the grand scheme of things, circumstance by circumstance? Hard to say, right? It's always a case-by-case basis. And obviously, even after all these generations of legal evolution and laws and so on, there are still faults and flaws in which people fall through often, or sometimes. But that's the thing, is that you have to presume innocence, because you never know. This is why I'm against the death penalty. I haven't talked about this in a while. There's two reasons why I'm against the death penalty. And admittedly, I have not yet been put into a position, thankfully, knock wood, cross my fingers, that I've had to face a circumstance where someone I love or is close to me has been taken in such a way that would necessitate a consideration of death penalty for the perpetrator. But in my mind, there's two things that cause me to be against the death penalty. First one is, at least in the modern day, when it comes to like lethal injection and so on, which is the more preferred method these days of execution. But either way, when a beloved pet is actually terminally ill, not Peanut or Fred, but actually terminally ill, putting such a pet to death is seen as a mercy. It's seen as a moral act, right? You're depriving them of pain. Same thing for a loved one, a human being. You know, there are death with dignity laws in several states, things like that. It's seen as a release from pain, a release from suffering. There is no mechanical difference between an act of mercy in ending someone's life and ending the life of someone who's committed a serious crime. All there is an escape from consequence in the case of a convicted killer. And in my mind, someone who has been convicted of a serious crime should live as long as possible to experience the consequences of their action and the deprivation of their freedoms. That's my first argument. But also, my second argument is, an irreversible punishment assumes an infallible system of justice. And we know that our system of justice is not infallible. Now, obviously, even in the case of someone who's locked up for many, many years and then found to be innocent after the fact, you can't give them back their years, right? I mean, there's a realistic limit to this. However, if you find out after the fact that you killed somebody who was innocent, there's really no redressing that. And so those are my two arguments to be against the death penalty. Not that I don't understand the reflex. Let me make that clear. I completely understand the arguments for it. I completely understand the desire for justice and vengeance and eye for an eye. I get that. It's a natural human inclination of justice. I understand, and I would not begrudge any family or friend of a victim that has that desire or impulse. I don't. But in the grand scheme of things, I'm against the death penalty for those two reasons. Now, as I say, I hope I'm never put to the test on those beliefs. But anyway, just a side note. I did a whole video on this. I was going to do a series way back when on the most contentious topics in our world and give my sort of soapbox opinion and justification for my stance on them at the time. I did one episode, and it was on the death penalty, where I think I said these exact same things. I was going to cover things like gun control and abortion and all these other things. But ultimately I didn't. I don't know why I didn't. I think probably just because it's more of a time capsule kind of thing. I could change my mind. I could have my mind changed. JB, thank you again. What Scribe said is also why people who commit sex crimes are cooked in jail. With that much evidence against them, you'd be crazy not to hate them. Yeah, I mean, and I'm not saying that someone who's convicted of a crime that would necessitate under law the death penalty or something are inherently innocent or have to be looked at as victims or something. I'm just saying in the grand scheme of things, I think we're better off without it. And I don't think it actually discourages crime so much. I know there's been many, many, many studies done to find out or to see, does the death penalty actually discourage criminal behavior? And as last I knew, and I'm happy to be corrected, last I knew, on balance, it doesn't. But if you lock somebody in a concrete box for the rest of their life, and they have to deal with that, I'd say that's pretty good, especially for those. And then the other thing, of course, is like, well, Scribe, what about people who get killed in prison? You know, somebody's been convicted of a crime and then other prisoners take action on behalf of society or something. Like the guy who, kills the child abuser in prison or something. Like, well, I guess I'm more of the argument that it shouldn't be the state to make those decisions. But sometimes you can't control individuals taking action. I don't know. There's a certain level of unavoidable hypocrisy, I suppose, in me, just like everybody else. But there's the ideal self and then the real self, and we all conflict with that from time to time. But anyway, there you go, everybody. There's some stories for the week that aren't directly related to the election. As I said, Tuesday, November 5th. Remember the 5th of November. Beginning at 4 p.m. Pacific Time, 7 p.m. Eastern Time, and I believe that is 6 p.m. Central Time. I'm going to start a live stream that will cover the election as the results roll in. And I have secured, by direct permission, the ability to rebroadcast some election coverage that I can put in there to sort of supplement my having to talk through things. So in addition to tracking an election map, I'll also have some actual footage coverage of some elections goings-ons and such that I'll be able to stream alongside me with, at least from the direct permission I've been given, without risk of any kind of complications for streaming such. So, looking forward to that on Tuesday. We'll see how long my voice lasts. I have a bottle of Jack Daniels and a 6-pack of Dr. Peppers ready to go in case I need a little courage as the night goes on. I also understand that several of my YouTube friends will also be running streams that night, including Ranting Monkey and I Think Sinatra Says and such, so feel free to stream hop between all of us as we go. I'll also hopefully have a few guests on as the night goes on to hang out and chat and discuss our theories as things develop. But beyond that, I'm not quite sure what I'll do for TEDx this week, depending on the outcome of the election. Maybe something cathartic. We'll see. Lexi Mads, Lexi Lime, Guy Fawkes live stream. Oh, well, I'm sure we'll see a few Guy Fawkes masks as the night goes on. But beyond that, hey, do you know that I have a Discord server? Well, I'll tell you, I have a Discord server. And unlike previous streams, I pre-prepared a link to the Discord server. Link is in the chat now. You just have to click on that link. You'll find yourself on the landing channel called Say Hello. And in addition to saying hello, you just have to say the secret word. The secret word will tell me that you actually watched the stream, are not a robot, and have thus earned the right, the privilege, the entitlement to join the Discord server. And today's secret word is peanut. Just say hello, Peanut, and I'll know that you watched the show. In addition to that, if you haven't already, please be sure to like the stream and share the stream and tell your friends about the stream and whatever else. Beyond this, you can also find me most mornings these days, which is still baffles me, on Midnight's Edge in the morning. So check out Midnight's Edge. And Tuesdays, unless something, well, this Tuesday, unfortunately not, because I'll be doing my own stream. But otherwise, most Tuesdays, you can find me on Midnight's Edge After Dark, Tuesday at 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern. And also Thursdays at 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern for TED Excellence. And of course, the Sunday stream, with occasional ambush streams in between. You never know. But let me end the preamble there and do the outro. Everyone, thank you so much for joining me. Moderators, thank you for keeping an eye on things, even though everyone here is so well behaved. You have very, very little to do. Everybody who donated either to myself or to the Leukemia Lymphoma Society at the top of the chat box, thank you guys so much for your generosity. Everyone, enjoy the rest of your Sunday and the week ahead, even though it's going to be chaotic for at least half the country, one way or the other. Hope to see you on Tuesday at 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern. I hope you are all safe and well. If you are not well, please get well soon, and I'll see you on the next one. Take care. Bye-bye.